everybody. It is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. And we're zooming in and focusing in on a very interesting and important viewer question that we got in. And that was really an experience that was relayed to us from a gentleman, from a male viewer. And basically to discuss and talk about sort of the upsurging of feelings, of emotion, unabashed crying, uncontrollable crying, even when you're doing basic things like driving your car, going to work, vacuuming your house, making your bed, just sort of a cacophony of feeling and emotion, just the water faucet is on. And to really kind of go in and explain and have a discussion of why this is. And number one, I just want to thank you so much for your viewership. Much love to the Peace and Harmony viewers, and kudos to you for diving in deep to understand this material. And this is this material that I'm relaying to you, the solutions, the information, is based on college study. It's based on decades of research and study myself that I am giving to you to hopefully save you years and decades of pain, and to get you, and confusion and feeling lost, to get you back on track with your life, your feelings, to the best of your ability. What you see, is a whole cacophony that I have curated through my various studies and areas of study, and kind of brought these together and synthesized these. So I oftentimes get input from viewers who are like, you're relaying information that psychotherapists can't even touch on. So I just want to relate to you that it's been through decades of study with which I am giving you this information, and as well as studying at the university level. And so furthermore, getting into that topic of kind of that wellspring of emotion, and whether that crops up at very inopportune times, like while you're driving, like while you're at church or your place of worship, while you're at work, at a family event. Just, it's not appropriate to be feeling these feelings. Why do you have this upsurging of feelings? Well, for one, realize that the cells in your body are a storehouse of information, energy, feeling, and this has all been recorded in the cells of your body. So, for example, going back to your infant years, if you were not echoed, meaning, cooed and cawed and like looked with eye contact, the tactile experience of being touched on your skin, being related to and mirrored back as a very infant, it's very interesting how very important these formative beginning months and years are to the healthy psychological development of an individual, and where they kind of have those formative years, and then furthermore define their identity, their experience, their connection and correlation and congruence with their own feelings, especially as it relates to the outside world. So when we talk about echoing, we're talking about mirroring back a child's both positive and negative experience and helping them navigate and understand those early in the very formative years of life. And if this is not done, if the mother or the caregiver, whoever the primary caregiver is narcissistic, psychopathic, does not have the time and attention and ability to give the tactual, comforting, the mirroring, the echoing, the need for understanding and then respect of this individual as their own little entity with their own boundaries, with their own needs, their own structure, then that child will not have that inner experience, that very first formative experience of themselves. If that is not given, there's all sorts of studies that have been done by even in adopted children who were cared for by nuns, and they did a study with which these lost children, in other words, they were given up for adoption, and they were cared for by by a religious organization that was cared for by nuns. So, and they did some studies, and they looked at the children who were set aside in cribs and not picked up, held, coddled, given that sensory experience on their body and given eye contact, but yet they were given nourishing food. And then they had another group with which the same group was only given food, so you've got the nurturing, coddling, eye contact side here, and then you've got the other side where they were just kind of left to their own devices, but given food, and maybe given in kind of like a wiry, very, cold and clinical sort of experience. The children who were held up, and nurtured and even not given as much food were able to be more adaptive, had more facial expression, had more responsiveness, and even gained more weight than the children who were only given food. It's the importance of that whole connection of warmth, understanding, respect, and echoing, which helps create sort of that inner being. And so really you take that forward through life. And furthermore, but in a narcissistic relationship, there's very much a patterning of this same thing as you go further into life. So for example, those inner experiences, if you were not echoed, or the same thing with which if you were pathologically lied to, your feelings, your needs, the experience of experiencing empathy, in other words, someone who can relate to and understand and validate your feelings, in other words, giving life to that. And it's very interesting. Michelle Obama had a discussion at the Cultural Center in Chicago recently, and she was talking about how important it is to give people a voice, especially when it comes to saying no, when it comes to sexual advances. And she made a very poignant point that was all throughout the media in the United States, and that exercising your voice takes repetition. And I agree with Michelle 100%. You need to, exercise that voice. So for example, if that child, or even in your, young school age, teen age, 20s and 30s, if you have not been able to exercise that voice, then that voice is going to go unspoken, unsung. You're not going to be able to assert yourself, like Michelle Obama was saying, in acts where maybe there was sexual aggression, or violating of boundaries, or giving into that, or sort of for lack of a better way of expressing it, for like the younger kids nowadays, especially in Facebook, I mean, it's just really kind of like they prostitute themselves, scantily dressed. The men, much more so, I would say the women than the men, but they're letting down their boundaries. So they're opening themselves up to be exposed and be hurt emotionally. So, for example, if you then don't have that inner experience of being validated, given that respect, then there's going to be a deep depression, a deep hurt, a very deep melancholy and depression and anxiety that is set up in that inner self, that inner core of your being, which then is not validated or given life or given expression. But yet your cells have recorded it in your body, in your subconscious mind. There are trillions and trillions of cells. And the subconscious mind, which is seated in the limbic brain, it's the fight or flight, it's the instinct, it's the impulse part of, it's a 20 million year old brain that you have inherited as being an individual. And then you've got the prefrontal cortex, which is, and then, where you, vision and have visualization and thinking and planning and dreaming are that kind of forward moving and progressive place where you live, so to speak, in your mind, without getting too clinical. But that limbic brain has a storehouse of all those memories, and then they can be triggered at specific times when you are needing that the most. So for example, if you are going around with uncontrollable crying and anxiety or depression, and it's just like coming out of nowhere, even anger, is because of that inner experience of not being validated and having that empathy. So it's a grief response. And human beings, Contrary to everything that's so impulsive today and, everything is right at your fingertips, we do experience a whole wellspring of deep emotions, which are, part of them is grief, which is the experience of loss. So, of course, that's a feeling of anxiety, feeling disoriented, feeling confused, feeling lost, not having direction, feeling hopeless. And so when these experiences, it's like you're cleansing yourself. You're getting a chance as an adult to be with you in those times when there was nobody there really there with you in that experience. So, for example, if you have been in a relationship with any amount of time, really, the longer, the more impactful. But with a narcissist or a psychopath, someone who has not given you that experience of validation and kind of, your own, what we call wholeness, you're being independent and strong as an individual, and then you relate to people from that perspective. If you are kind of feeling like there's always something missing, there's always something wrong, there's something always hurting, then it's always the feeling that, they might find out, and then you're always trying to cover it up. So what ends up happening is that, and I know that this is going into a long, intense video, but that as, Alice Walker, in her book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, she goes into quite in depth how the child or the individual or then, the young adult and then the adult develops a false self. In other words, to appease the narcissist or psychopath. So in the depth with which one can adapt a false self to appease the narcissist or psychopath can be done unconsciously because, you need at one time that relationship. You need intimacy, love, someone to get married to, someone to live with, someone to share experiences with. You need a parent. An infant isn't going to raise themselves. It's not like, a young cult where they're born in, and then they're walking and as fast as their mother in the first, 30 minutes of their life. Human beings, we have a much longer, prolonged, developmental period. I mean, you're not even fully developed at the age of 16 years. Just think about that. 18 years, 21 years. I mean, the human development cycle takes a long time to mature and develop and sort of work through all those stages of human life. So that's why it's really kind of complex. We have so much going on. And, the collective unconscious, like Jung. So when we talk about that sort of releasing of emotions where, it's really because there's an inner part of you that is mourning, that is grieving for a loss. And so, of course, that is expressed through, sometimes even as anger, but as sadness, as melancholy, as depression, as anxiety, of feeling empty, feeling like you are maybe a nobody. And so to work through those feelings is going to take time. It's going to take time. It's just like, time heals all wounds. There are emotional wounds. I mean, these are inner life experiences that take time to work through and resolve and kind of purge and cleanse through. So the unabashed crying, the water faucet turning on, is because the cells are pining or desiring expression and validation and sort of that embracing from you and then being there for yourself, like John Bradshaw, championing the inner child, the homecoming. Alice Walker talks it as creating a home. How can a wounded person come home to a home that was never there? So it's kind of like giving you the opportunity as an adult now with all your other experiences to kind of come through and comfort yourself and be with yourself in those times of loss. So as we always say, the narcissist or psychopath, because of their pathological sense of self-importance and the feeling that in their empathy deficit as a personality disorder, they can't be with you in a specific way. They can be with you in a very shallow sense, but they can't always be with you in an emotional sense, not emotionally available. They're not going to get you, understand you. And so it creates this whole dichotomy in this division within you that needs to be grieved out. So that is really the reason why. And, it is triggered, and it is kind of like you have to let it all out. You have to let it run its course. You have to be with yourself in what I call those valley moments. Basically, when you're, comforting yourself. And in the book that I'm working on and writing right now, it is so important to incorporate so many senses and resensitize yourself in life. So, for example, being comforting to the skin, comforting to eye contact. And we're going to go into the whole, how to heal from this, but to realize that, yes, you can work through this. And yes, that these, that these times can kind of cauterize and heal within, and then be strong and be solid so that they're not out of control. So you don't have the social anxiety, you don't have the sweating, you don't have the crying in the meeting, you don't have the crying in the grocery store, you don't have the crying, while you're brushing your teeth or at the, copier, or at least as frequently, and then it'll heal and cauterize once you realize kind of the why. And then realizing, kind of mourning the loss of that experience of being validated, and to be there kind of as a parent, kind of being there for the wounded inner child, or to be, the best comforter you can be to yourself in that experience. And then just give yourself really kind of open up that inner dialogue, that intrapersonal relationship, which means relationship within, and just be like, validate your feelings. That was, be there for yourself, in other words, because you are really your own best friend in this situation. You can really get close and then really get solid self-esteem, really kind of a rock that cannot be shaken once you move through these experiences that are often painful and time-consuming. It can take a lot of time. It can be embarrassing. It can be humiliating. It's the shaming, it's kind of, it's like a coming out of your wounded self that was not validated, and to feel and kind of work through the betrayal. And also another experience, which is very important, is the feeling of intrusiveness, which is kind of a very rich, very difficult mix to sort out. It's almost like a recipe of a stew. There's also a tinge of intrusiveness, so like a violation of your privacy that goes along with this experience of being, violated in a way that a narcissistic or psychopathic relationship does incur. So I'm here to tell you that yes, the feelings will get better. They will cauterize. They will heal up emotionally inside. You need to give a validation to yourself and go, tell yourself, wow, I've been through just an amazingly horrible time and emotionally traumatizing, which has created this experience. And thank God I'm coming through. Thank God I'm out of it and I'm away from this toxic influence. So it's a very much a positive state, because it means that you're in the space where you need to be present and focusing on being there for yourself. So it's kind of like developing that higher awareness, that higher consciousness, that wisdom, and then comforting yourself really on all levels, all senses, of touch, of scent, of sight, of sound, of taste, and then that sixth sense, which is kind of like realizing that there's a bigger lesson to be learned at store here, and to thank God that you're moving through the other side, and to keep looking, up that mountain, up at that precipice, that top where you want to go. Keep focused there, and then realize that when you get to the summit, there's going to be so much celebration. There's going to be so much joy in your life. You're going to see other people who have made it up, who have been there maybe just right, who got there when you got there, who have been there for a little while, who are there to embrace you, and to embrace you in your solidity, your solidarity, and your solid state. And it really does take kind of a globe nowadays. This is the information age. You will understand the richness of so many people's struggles who have got to that summit in life, and it becomes kind of a euphoric experience, but you have to work through, you have to stay with it. A lot of people ask me, peace and harmony, how long is it going to take? It takes at least 18 months to work through just an intimate relationship with a psychopath, where you get to the point where you're at least feeling focused. And it can take 2 to 5 years, even after that, where you really, really become solid and feeling more secure. And if you were raised by this type of individual, it might even take 5 to 10 years to get to that, but you are going to get there. It does take consistent daily and consistent focus. In the tools I am, because of request, I am developing also a number of different tools and other products for people to reinforce their healing. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up now. We're going to continue this more. But thank you so much for your inquiry, your comments, and please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.